Dear friends of the Bruno Kreisky Forum and my Arab Change series, warm greetings to you in times of the coronavirus. It's the second time I speak to you from my house arrest in the 12th district of Vienna, and I fear it will not be the last time. However, we want to let you know what we had planned and are still planning to present to you. A lecture and discussion with Thomas Hegghammer from Norway about his new book, The Caravan, Abdallah Azzam and the Rise of Global Jihad. We asked Thomas to make a short video, and you really should have a look at it. It's not only extremely interesting, but this guy is also very charming. Seriously speaking, Thomas Hegghammer is an internationally renowned expert for jihadism. In this capacity, he even has been invited to testify in front of the US Congress and the British Parliament. His new book is not only the first real biography of Azzam, you will hear more from him in the video, but it's a new benchmark for the studies on the globalization of Islamic extremism. And someone said it reads like a Graham Greene thriller, and I think he's right. Let me introduce Thomas to you. He's a senior research fellow at the Norwegian Defense Research Establishment and adjunct professor in the Department of Political Science at the University of Oslo. He did Middle Eastern Studies at the University of Oxford and the Sciences Po in Paris. One of his books is Jihad in Saudi Arabia, and he edited a volume titled Jihadi Culture. So, I give the floor now to Thomas, and I invite you to visit us in the Armbrustergasse when he will be able to show up personally, hopefully in autumn. Bye-bye.
I'm Thomas Hegghammer, Senior Research Fellow at the Norwegian Defense Research Establishment in Oslo. I was supposed to come to the Kreisky Forum and talk about my new book, The Caravan, Abdallah Azzam and the Rise of Global Jihad. But unfortunately, the coronavirus got in the way, so now I'm stuck here in Oslo with corona hair. Apologies for that. I really hope that I'll be able to come to Vienna at a later stage, but that might take a while, so I figured I'd say a few words about the book here in the meantime. The Caravan is basically about how the jihadi movement first emerged. Now, we've all heard a lot about jihadism in recent years. ISIS, for the foreign fighters in Syria, and before that, al-Qaida, 9/11, etc. But we haven't really understood how the movement came into being. And that's what my book tries to do. It goes back to the 1980s, and specifically the so-called Afghan Jihad, where thousands of foreign fighters from around the Muslim world came as war volunteers to fight against the Soviet occupation. And it was from this community of Afghan Arabs that later jihadi groups emerged. So the book is basically an attempt to sort of reverse engineer that initial mobilization, the Afghan Arab mobilization, to explain how and why it happened, who the first movers were, and how they were able to mobilize so many people, and what happened inside that community that produced all this radicalism. But the book is also a biography because it focuses on the central individual who was leading the Afghan Arab mobilization effort. And that was a man named Abdallah Azzam. Now, he isn't very well known in the West today because he died in 1989, but in the world of Islamism, he is a superstar. He's basically the Che Guevara of jihadism. And aside from being extremely influential and the sort of the key entrepreneur behind that crucial mobilization, he's also an interesting figure because his life was very interesting, and he was a little bit like Forrest Gump in that he was present in all the key historical episodes of the post war period in the Middle East. So the book sort of follows him from his birth in Palestine in the early 40s, through the 48 war, through the 67 war when he becomes a refugee, through his involvement with the Fedayeen in Jordan, through his studying to become a religious cleric at al-Azhar University in Cairo in the early 70s, on to become a lecturer in Jordan in the late 70s, and to him getting expelled from Jordan in 1980, passing through Saudi Arabia, and eventually ending up in Afghanistan, where he became the godfather of the Afghan Arabs. And so he's a useful prism through which we can understand Islamism in the 60s and 70s and 80s. It's also, I think, quite a fun read. I mean, there are lots of interesting anecdotes in there, precisely because he was able to do so many things. For example, we learned that Abdallah Azzam and Osama bin Laden first met not in Afghanistan or in Saudi Arabia, but in the American Midwest, where we learned that Abdallah Azzam was good friends with Cat Stevens, the pop star, for example. And if I were in Vienna, I would show you lots of pictures and films, etc., to illustrate this quite interesting life, but that will have to wait until later. Now, in the meantime, I would recommend, of course, that you take a look at the book. You can order it from most of the online web stores, and I hope that I'll be able to come and present it in person at a later stage. Thank you for now. Goodbye.